The sky above the capital city of Virith was a deep violet, streaked with golden clouds that shimmered like molten metal. From her place on the high cliffs outside the city, Lyra, a young Omega, watched the towers and walls below. Her dark hair whipped around her face in the cold wind, and her amber eyes, sharp and thoughtful, reflected both longing and sorrow. She had always lived on the edges of society, but today her heart weighed heavier than ever. The word Barren echoed in her mind. In the court of Alpha King Kale, she had been called cursed, incapable of bearing life. For an Omega, that was the cruelest insult imaginable. The curse, real or imagined, had been declared by the Council of Elders, who claimed they had seen the signs in the stars above. They said the heavens themselves had rejected her. Lyra closed her eyes, remembering the humiliation. She had been brought to the Grand Palace Hall, forced to kneel before the king and his advisors, while every noble in the room whispered and stared. She cannot bear children, they had said. She is a wasted Omega. She is cursed. Yet even as the words cut deep, Lyra felt a spark inside her, a small, stubborn flame. She was not weak. She had survived hunger, cold, and loneliness. She had faced dangers that would have broken others, and she had learned that her mind, her hands, and her heart could achieve things that no one expected. The wind howled, carrying with it the distant sound of the city's activity. Traders shouted, children laughed, and guards walked their patrols. The life of the city went on, indifferent to the pain of one Omega. But Lyra did not need their pity. She had learned to survive on her own. Her refuge was a small rocky outcrop near a spring. Here she could collect water, gather wild herbs, and tend to the small animals that had come to trust her. Lyra knelt by the spring, cupping her hands in the cold water, and let her reflection greet her. She looked strong. Her muscles were lean but powerful, a testament to the work she had done alone. Her eyes, golden and fierce, reflected determination rather than despair. Still, the words of the council haunted her. Barren, cursed, rejected. The society she lived in treated Omegas as tools, as vessels for bearing heirs to the Alphas, and yet she had survived where others failed. Perhaps she was cursed, but maybe, just maybe, the curse was wrong. As the sun dipped lower behind the jagged mountains, a shadow fell over her. Lyra's senses sharpened instantly. She turned, hand resting on the hilt of the small knife she always carried. A figure emerged from the rocks above her, a tall man in royal garb, his cloak brushing the stones. He moved with the confidence of someone who knew he was watched and obeyed. Lyra's breath caught. This was Alpha King Kale himself. He was taller than any man she had ever seen, broad-shouldered and commanding, with hair black as night and eyes that gleamed with intelligence. Rumors of his cruelty and pride had reached even her secluded home. No Omega had ever dared to approach him willingly. "You are Lyra," Kale said, his voice deep and calm, carrying over the wind. "The council speaks much about you. About your curse." Lyra stood slowly, keeping her voice steady. "Yes, my king, and what would you know of it?" Kyle's eyes narrowed slightly. "I know that some curses are lies. Some are misunderstandings. I have watched you." Lyra's heart skipped. "Watched me?" she asked, cautious. "Yes." Kale stepped closer, the wind tugging at his cloak. "You are strong. You survive where others fail. You endure." Lyra felt a mixture of fear and curiosity. Most Alphas would have laughed at her, ignored her, or worse. Yet this one seemed different. Still, she did not trust easily. "And if I am cursed?" she asked. "Does that matter to you?" Kale's lips curved slightly, but he said nothing. Instead, he gestured toward the city. "Come with me." "You will see. Perhaps you're not what they say." Lyra hesitated. To go with the Alpha King willingly could be dangerous. Yet something in his tone and the way he looked at her told her this was not a trick. Perhaps it was opportunity. Perhaps it was a chance to prove herself. She followed cautiously, her knife hidden beneath her cloak. The palace gates opened before them, massive doors etched with the history of generations. Guards bowed as Kale passed, but their eyes flicked to Lyra, curious and suspicious. She was just an Omega after all, a lowly creature in their eyes. But Kale did not seem to care. Inside the hall, the council waited, a mix of old and powerful faces. They whispered among themselves as Kale entered with Lyra behind him. "Bring her forward," he commanded. Lyra's knees ached, but she stood tall. "I am here," she said, her voice steady despite the fear twisting in her stomach. One of the elders, a thin woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, spoke first. "Your Majesty, this Omega, she is cursed. She cannot bear children. She should be exiled or destroyed." Kale raised a hand, silencing her. Perhaps she is the one who will show us what humans are capable of. The council erupted in murmurs. Humans? She is only an Omega. Do not play games, Kale. Kale ignored them. He turned to Lyra. "Tell me," he said, voice calm but commanding. "How do you survive? How do you endure when others fail?" Lyra blinked. She had expected mockery, not interest. I do what I must," she said finally. "I adapt. I observe, I learn. I never give up," Kyle nodded slowly. "That is why you are here. Not because of your curse, but because of your strength." The council's whispers grew louder, some laughing, some shaking their heads. Lyra felt their judgment, their doubt. But she did not bow her head. She had faced worse. And she had learned that strength was not always physical. It was in the mind, the heart, and the will. Kale studied her for a long moment, then spoke to the council. "I will take her under my protection. She will live in my court. You will all respect that." Shock rippled through the room. Some gasped. Others murmured angrily. "The cursed Omega under the king's protection?" One elder said incredulously. "It is unheard of." Kale's eyes were icy as he turned to them. "It is done." Lyra felt her heart pound. She was still an Omega, still considered cursed by most, but now she had a chance to prove herself in the heart of the alien world that had rejected her. Fear remained, yes, but alongside it grew a thrill of possibility. Perhaps the curse was not the end, but a beginning. The day faded and the hall emptied. Kale walked beside Lyra, silent for a moment. "You are brave," he said finally, "but bravery alone will not protect you here. You will need wisdom, patience, and courage beyond anything you have known." Lyra nodded. "I am ready," she said, feeling for the first time a sense of purpose. Kale's lips curved slightly. "Good. Then perhaps the council will learn something new about humans. Perhaps you are more than they ever imagined." Lyra did not know what lay ahead. She knew only that she had survived this far, and somehow she would survive the trials to come. The wind from the cliffs whispered around them, carrying with it a promise. Even a cursed Omega could change the fate of a kingdom. And somewhere deep within, Lyra felt a spark of hope. Perhaps she was not cursed at all. Perhaps the human spirit, the one thing the alien world could not understand, would prove stronger than any prophecy, stronger than any alpha, stronger than any curse. The sun sank below the horizon, and the violet sky deepened into night. The city lights below twinkled like distant stars, reflecting the strange new possibilities of tomorrow. And Lyra, the rejected Omega, the cursed one, the outcast, took her first steps into a world that had never known the power of a human heart. The palace of Virith was larger than any city Lyra had ever seen. Towering spires of black crystal shimmered under the twin moons, and vast corridors stretched further than the eye could see. Every surface gleamed, polished to a perfection that seemed unnatural. Guards moved like shadows along the halls, and attendants whispered as Lyra passed. Yet for all its beauty, she could sense the coldness beneath it. This palace, built to display power, felt empty of warmth. Lyra followed Alpha King Kale through a corridor lined with statues of previous rulers. Each figure was stern, frozen in time, eyes staring outward with silent authority. Kale moved with quiet confidence, his cloak brushing the polished floor. He did not speak for several minutes, as though allowing the palace itself to welcome her. Finally, he stopped before a door of black crystal veined with gold. "This will be your quarters," he said. His eyes studied her, searching. "You will need rest. Tomorrow you will meet the council again, and you will need your mind clear." Lyra nodded, curiosity mixed with apprehension. "I will do as you command, my king." Kale's lips curved slightly. "Good, but do not forget. Obedience alone is not enough here. Survival demands thought, and thought in this palace is rare." Once inside her quarters, Lyra took a moment to breathe. The room was large, with high ceilings, polished floors, and a balcony that overlooked the palace gardens. Rich fabrics hung on the walls, and a soft bed sat in the center, covered with golden sheets. For the first time in her life, she had a space of her own, a place where she could think, plan, and prepare. She moved to the balcony, looking down at the gardens below. The plants were strange, their leaves glowing faintly in the moonlight. Birds with shimmering feathers flitted among the branches. Lyra had never seen such life. And yet, even in this beauty, she felt an undercurrent of danger. The palace was a place of power, and power, she knew, was rarely kind. The next morning, Lyra was summoned to the council chambers. She wore simple clothes woven from dark fabrics that blended with the court's decor. The council was waiting. Elders, generals, and advisors all glaring at her with thinly veiled disdain. They murmured among themselves as she entered, some shaking their heads, others exchanging knowing looks. Kale sat at the head of the chamber, his expression unreadable. "This Omega is under my protection," he said. "She will participate in the council's matters when necessary. She may observe and speak if she has wisdom to share." One elder, a tall man with narrow eyes, sneered. "A cursed Omega among the council? Surely, Your Majesty, this is a jest." Kale's gaze was sharp. "There are no jokes here. Perhaps she will teach you something you have not learned in centuries." Lyra's pulse quickened. She had expected mockery, but Kale's words gave her courage. She straightened her back and spoke, her voice steady. "I may be an Omega, and I may be considered cursed, but I am not powerless. I can observe, think, and act. If you will allow it, I will help solve the problems that threaten the kingdom." A murmur of disbelief ran through the chamber. Some whispered, "She dares speak?" Others scoffed. Yet Kale said nothing. He simply nodded once, silently affirming her right to stand. The first crisis came quickly. A neighboring kingdom, jealous of Kale's rule, had begun sending agents to destabilize the palace. Messages of rebellion, sabotage, and espionage had reached the council, and fear had gripped the room. The council debated endlessly, offering suggestions steeped in tradition, but none worked. They relied on brute force, intimidation, and rules that had failed before. Kale turned to Lyra. "You have a mind unlike ours," he said. "Tell me what you would do." Lyra considered. Her human instincts, honed through years of survival, guided her thoughts. "I would not attack blindly," she said. "I would learn the enemy first. Watch their patterns, understand their goals. If we know them, we can prevent their actions before they begin. Fear and force alone will not protect the kingdom." The council scoffed, but Kale's eyes glimmered with approval. "Go on." "They are trying to destabilize through division," Lyra continued. "They spread false rumors, create distrust among your generals, and attempt to manipulate the citizens. The solution is not violence, but foresight. If we can intercept the lies, reveal the truth, and offer people a plan to protect themselves, we remove the enemy's power without a single sword drawn." Silence fell. Then Kale spoke quietly but firmly. "Prepare the plan. She will lead the effort." The council erupted in protests. "The Omega? Lead our security?" one elder exclaimed. "This is madness!" Kale's hand rose, stopping them. "You will do as commanded, or you may leave my presence." Lyra swallowed her fear and nodded. She knew this was dangerous. Failure could cost her life. But the human spirit thrives in danger, she reminded herself. Challenges were not obstacles, they were opportunities. Over the following days, Lyra worked tirelessly. She studied the palace's defenses, spoke with guards, and observed the movements of courtiers. She noticed patterns others overlooked. How the servants moved when the gates were left unattended, which advisors whispered secrets to each other. Using her human intuition and adaptability, she devised a plan that combined deception, surveillance, and careful diplomacy. When Kale implemented her strategy, the results were astonishing. Several agents attempting sabotage were caught before they could act. Rumors were exposed and corrected, and the citizens began to rally around the king, unaware of the danger that had been neutralized. The council watched in disbelief. "How could an Omega?" one elder began, but Kyle silenced him with a look. "You see," Kyle said to the council, his tone calm but full of authority, "strength is not always measured by birth or rank. It is measured by mind, courage, and resolve. Perhaps you should remember this lesson well." Lyra felt a thrill. She had proven herself, not to the council, not to the palace, but to herself. She could survive here. She could thrive. And perhaps she could change the way this rigid society viewed humans and Omegas alike. But the palace was not without its dangers. The closer she worked with Kyle, the more she saw the jealousy and fear in the eyes of others. Some guards whispered that she was too clever, too cunning for her rank. Some nobles plotted to remove her, seeing her as a threat to their influence. And yet, Kale's protection was a shield, albeit a fragile one. One night, as Lyra walked the palace gardens under the twin moons, Kale joined her. He did not speak immediately, simply walking beside her in silence. "You have changed the course of events today," he said finally. "The council will not forget your actions," Lyra shrugged. "I did what I had to. Humans survive by acting, not by waiting for others to act for us." Kale's gaze lingered on her. "Humans are remarkable," he said softly. "You think differently, feel differently, act differently. It is unsettling and yet powerful." Lyra looked at him. "Is that why you brought me here? To test me?" Kale shook his head. "Not to test you. To see if what I suspected is true. Humans, they endure, they adapt, they find ways where none exist. Perhaps you will change more than the council or even I can imagine." For the first time, Lyra felt a connection with the Alpha King. Not fear, not awe, but something closer to respect and trust. And she realized, though it was dangerous to admit, that the connection was mutual. Kale respected her mind, her courage, and her spirit. And in a world where Omegas were nothing, that respect was powerful beyond words. But danger lingered. Not all would accept a cursed Omega rising in the court. Not all would ignore human ingenuity and strength. Whispers of rebellion, envy, and sabotage simmered beneath the palace's shining surface. Lyra knew that tomorrow could bring triumph, or disaster, and yet she felt ready. For the first time in her life, Lyra understood that being human was not a weakness. It was a gift. And in the court of the Alpha King, that gift might change the fate of a kingdom. The twin moons rose higher, casting silver light across the gardens. Lyra and Kale stood together, silent but united, facing a world that had underestimated them both. And somewhere deep in the palace, plots whispered, and danger waited. But so did the strength of human spirit, quiet and unyielding. Ready to challenge any threat, Lyra knew one thing for certain: she would survive. She would thrive. And she would show the universe the power of a human heart.